It's nice to see so many of you, especially you in the back. It's comfy there, but if you want, you can come forward. I promise not to bite. I was just thinking before we start to figure out what kind of people you are, so I can adjust my talk to who you are and what you work with. So how many of you, probably most of you, are developers? Okay, the one who's not the developer, who works with design or UX? 2. Who works with something else? Shout what you're working with. Computers. You're building them? Cool. How many of you work in a large corporation? How many of you works in a startup? None. Where are the startups? Who works as in a consultancy? Who does something else? What do you do? Medium-sized. Of course. Good. I was just thinking I could start with telling you a story that happened about 7 or 8 years ago. I was starting at... Okay, how many of you are non-Norwegian? Okay. So how many of you are not familiar with Norwegian culture, newspapers, organizations, and stuff like that? Okay, then I'll explain some of them. 7 years ago, I started an organization called NAF. It's the Norwegian Automobile Federation. It's the same as it's a car organization for car owners. And I was hired there to help them with innovation. They had heard about the word innovation, and they had been to San Francisco, been inspired, and then they wanted me to help them figure out what to do. And my first job was to digitalize this book. It's really heavy, and we have about 500,000 members. So sending this book to 500,000 members is quite expensive, and it's expensive to make and fill. And they were thinking, if we digitalize it, we will save a lot of money, and we will be innovative. And their idea of digitalize this book was to make it as a PDF, because then it will be an easy-to-bring digital road book. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of a road book that's maps, but also that tells you everything you need to know about what's in the area you are. And I told them to make this book that has 744 pages to PDF. It makes as much sense as making the phone book a PDF. It doesn't help you, it makes it worse. You don't use technology at all. You're kind of just applying technology to the product. So I told them we have to figure out what the book does for people. You have to figure out what the role it is, what value it brings, and then we can see what kind of technology, what kind of service will give the same value or added value. So I've traveled a lot around Norway with this book and talked a lot with people figuring out what kind of value it did bring. So it was a lot of different values, and I won't tell you about the services we figured out would be better. But we found out more or less that it was inspiration, it was kind of the glue in the family, because they had something to talk about in an 8-hour drive that you could read in the book all the time. So we had like small nuggets of information during the road. And you can also find small areas to see and watch and where to stop. And I think Google may have, with Google Maps, have kind of ruined a lot of the things we were thinking. And the implementation of the ideas was done by the operational part of the organization. So I won't show you what we ended up with, because it was horrible. But I think the mindset of the leaders in that organization is quite similar to a lot of mindset I meet when we talk about digitalization. They have their products, and they think, what kind of technology should we put on our products to make them digitalized? And my claim is that that is so horribly wrong approach, because you don't use the technology at all to make new value, to make new products. You're just stuck. I'm Eline Giskeødegård. I'm the head of Connected World at Eggs Design. We're a quite large design agency who does service design, product design, digital design, but we also have creative tech people. And we work with a lot of different companies here in Norway and in Denmark and in Brazil. I've worked more or less with innovation and digital development the last 10, 11, 12 years. And worked with a lot of different companies in that process, both in the ID stage, but also in implementing new services. I think the focus on human and the focus on trying to figure out what we're helping them with, what kind of value we should bring, is super important now. I have this one, I forget. Because we're in the middle of something I would like to call a perfect storm of new technology. There's a lot of really, really, really exciting technology that is ramping up now. And more mainstream companies are using and exploring these technologies. And they're more or less mainstream. But most companies that I talk with are searching amongst these technologies to find the next big hit. So they feel that we're in the everlasting age of digitalization. Everlasting in their perspective is like 20 years, but for them it feels like forever. And there's always like new waves of technologies. And I think even though for most of you, this feels like the most natural thing. But for many leaders, I know they think, what? We have already digitalized. We're on the web, we're on Facebook, you can even apply for stuff and buy stuff on the internet. We have spent so much money on digitalization. And now there's a new wave, new technology, and we have to invest in that as well. When does it stop? And I know most of them that's a bit older are kind of more familiar when you develop things. The development has an end. You develop a product, and then you operational it, and then you earn money. And after 10, 15 years, you develop something new. But it doesn't work like that anymore. And I kind of can't understand that, because if you should follow like every new technology, even the largest corporation can't afford it. And most of them tells me, Eline, we can't be Google. We can't be Amazon. We can't afford it. And even one leader told me in secrecy, Eline, I'm retiring in a few years. So my plan is just to close my eyes, hold my breath, and hope that my company survives the next year, and then the next guy can just find a solution. I feel sorry for that company. And I hope that most of your companies doesn't have that approach, because this is going to last. But I think one other problem with this feeling of the everlasting digitalization and that things never end is the way we approach it, or most companies approach it. As I said, we look at it as technology and digitalization as something we should apply to our products or apply to our service. And when you do that, it could often look like this. I worked a lot with banks a few years now because they're a bit scared of new legal implications and tech startups and stuff like that. And their way of digitalization that they're really proud about and they've done well, but they have taken their products from the like forever, 60s, 70s, it's like the same products, the same services, the same processes. They just put it on the internet. And then they think we're digitalized. And now they're automating the process and they feel super digitalized. But then there's some tech startups that doesn't have systems from the 60s. A lot of banks actually have systems from the 60s. I'm not kidding you. So there's a lot of things they can't do. But there's tech startups that doesn't look at existing services. They doesn't look at the loans, the way we earn money on loans. They don't look at credit cards, the way we earn money on credit cards. They're not looking at existing business models and are worried about not earning the money you earn today. They look at the user. What is the user problem? What do they lack? What do they miss? What could we bring of value? And when they found out that and apply new technology to that, that's the real problem for the banks, not the legal stuff. Even worse examples are in IoT. This is probably the worst example. Do anyone have a product like this? Good. I don't think they're in the market anymore. So this is a connected egg carton. So when you're in the grocery store and buying eggs, you can just open up your mobile phone and see how many eggs do I have left. It's super smart. So if you have the same for your eggs and your milk and your bananas and everything, or you can just look at the camera in your refrigerator, it will be so easy to shop. To put a chip in your product is not to add value or to use technology for the greater good. And Cisco just did a survey with almost 2,000 IT and business decision makers, and they found out that, this is IoT, I work most with that, but they found out that 75% of the IoT project was not a success. That's a lot of money. How many of you have been a part of a digitalization project that failed or didn't reach the market? Wow, I could do that. Like tons of them. And it often stops because when it hits the market first time, if it hits the market at all, it doesn't succeed. It's much more costly. It doesn't fit with the organization. It doesn't fit with the existing technology. There's a lot of pitfalls. And I think the reason why they fail is more or less that they focus on their service and on their product. At the same time I was working with this, there were two guys, not this one, this is just like image stolen from Google, I'm sorry. But two guys, a bit younger than this guy, who was standing in the rain, so you could imagine it raining, and they have been to a conference quite like this, and waiting for a taxi. Have you heard of the guys? Do you know what company they build?
You can guess.
Yeah, you can guess.
Probably Uber?
Yes. So they started with the problem. We're standing here. We have a mobile phone. This was quite new. In 2008, the smartphones, it wasn't new, but iPhone was new. And there's like tons of cars driving past them, but they couldn't get a cab. And they were thinking, the cab companies does something wrong. Why can't we just tap our phones and find the nearest cab, and they can find us? And it will be so much easier. So they build Uber. They don't earn that much money yet, and they've been a bit conflicting, but still, they disrupted a whole sector. And the sector is trying to follow, but they aren't there yet. So a lot of people say it's digital disruption. It's not. They just found an area where the taxi companies didn't serve the customer good enough, and they used technology to create a solution. So this is Uber. And at approximately the same time, 2007 to 2008, there were a lot of startup guys that found areas in the market, in their market, where we didn't serve the customers good enough because the customer expectations have changed. And that's probably the most tech-driven part of innovation is customer expectation. Because if you get served in a way in one sector, you expect that another business in a completely another sector also serves you in the same way. So I actually remember when I was a student in 2001, when I was on the internet, I always had a book. Have any of you any idea why I had a book?
Waiting for the page to load?
Yep. It took so long time to wait for the page to load, so I could read like 5 or 6 pages each time. And I have a daughter who is 3 years old now, and if the iPad uses more like 1 second to load, she's just hitting it really hard. Just wait for it. So the expectation on how fast things go is completely different now than for like 17 years ago. That applies to everyone. So these guys, do you see what kind of companies it is? It's Airbnb, Spotify, Uber, and Kickstarter. They found different problems in different markets where we were underserved. And then they used the super new approach to technology that we call Web 2.0, or peer-to-peer technology. It was really, really hitting off around 2008, and I know a lot of companies were trying to make Wiki something, or peer-to-peer service, or that. And a lot of companies were just kind of searching the technology for an area to build a company. But those guys, they found out that we didn't listen to music the way we listened before. We were on LimeWire and getting viruses and songs. Airbnb, there was, when there was a conference, large conferences, it was hard to get a room, a hotel room. And we can hire out hours, and we can earn money. We need money. And Kickstarter was kind of democratizing the production of products. Like you can test your product in the market before you produced any of it. So one of the things I hope you can bring home to your company, and hopefully you do it already, is focusing on user need. set the user always as a starting point. It doesn't have to be your existing user. It just have to be a user, someone you could help. And start the process around them. I just have to say, when I talk about this, if one of you dare to talk back, one of you might have said what Henry Ford said several years ago. He said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So we shouldn't ask people what they want. We should just sit in our office and think smart ideas, and then we have to sell them to people because we know better what they need than they do by themselves. And in one way, I agree. Don't ask people what they want, because people can't imagine an iPhone. They can't imagine blockchain or what you can use to block cryptocurrencies. They can't imagine things that are not there. But they know a lot about what they need and what their problems are and how they feel underserved. So I have another favorite. He's like 50 centimeters higher than me. He's like super tall. So I had lunch with him once, and it was just, whoa. But he's one of my gurus in innovation. If you haven't heard of him and you're doing product development or service development, check him out. He's super smart. This is quite old. I think it's like 10 or 15 years. But he was talking about what kind of job would consumers want to hire your product for. And he had something we call the milkshake story. Have any of you heard about the milkshake story? Okay, then I'll tell it too. There was not McDonald's, but a quite similar kind of fast food chain that wanted to sell more milkshakes. And they hired a traditional consultancy to help them figure out what the customer wants. And the consultancy interviewed the customers. What kind of milkshakes do they like? And they liked it more chunky, more flavor. And they found out what most customers liked in the milkshakes, and they changed the milkshake taste. And they didn't sell any more milkshake. But we made it better. But then they hired Clayton and his gang, and they started to ask different questions. They asked, when do you buy milkshake? What kind of job does the milkshake do for you? And they were just, what? And then they asked, okay, in the same situation you were when you buy milkshake, but you hired some else product to do the same job. What kind of product was that? And how did they deliver on the job? So one guy said, no, I bought a Snickers, but it took just on my way to my work. I'm commuting. But it took like 3 minutes to eat the Snickers, and then I felt bad afterwards. Another one said, no, he bought a bagel, but trying to drive with one hand and having jam on the bagel was just super messy. And he had like different products that did the same job. So they found out that the job the milkshake did was entertainment on a long commute. So a commute that took about 30 minutes to an hour. They could drink milkshake. They would be a bit fuller, so they would last until lunch. And they will have like entertainment the whole way. So, okay, they think our main customers in the early morning are commuters. How could we serve them better? So they kind of made the fancy take your own milkshake stand, because commuters then could be really, really fast through the cafe. They also made it a bit more chunky, so it took a bit longer time to drink it. So they had like entertainment the whole way. And they also put like small pieces of fruit in it. So now and then they had like a tiny surprise and during their commute. So when they figure out what kind of job the product did, it was so much easier to find out how to develop it. What kind of added value could we bring so we could serve the customer better? So this is kind of super low tech, but it applies. You have to think the same way when you digitalize a product. It's figuring out what kind of job do we help our customer with, and what could we apply, and how could we create a new solution that helps you. Yep.
So it sounds reasonable that you need to know what your product is doing for people, or how people are using your product in order to develop it further.
Yep.
In an efficient and productive way. But that probably means that you will need to track and analyze the data of your users.
Yep.
What does the EU think about that these days?
Like track and analyze
Your users.
your user. They say you have to ask them first. Can we track you? A lot of companies does this already, and they're now sending you tons of emails asking you, can we still track you? And can we still send you emails? It's a bit on the side, but I always say that when you're using data or when you ask for data for a customer, you always have to bring value back. So don't ask for information that the customer can't see that you bring value back on. So that's one part of the development side. So, but you can, I'm not like super familiar with what can or not, but a lot of data you still can track and you still can analyze, and you very much can talk to your customers. So you have to have both quantitative, as you said, and qualitative data. So you have to talk to your customer actually, and you also have to talk to your non-customers, the one who don't choose you, and figure out why. And if you're a startup or thinking about a startup and you don't have existing users, then you have to find out what kind of area you're supposed to or do you want to work in, and ask different users what kind of problem they have. Yep.
What impact did the changes they have make on sales?
I don't remember the percent because it's such an old story, but tremendous effect. So because then it was so much easier, and it was like they did the job so much better than the Snickers and the bagels and the bananas. Cool. So what I will say that you have to take home with you is that you have to fall in love with your customer's problem, not your solution. So even if your existing product or you're making a new product, always remember the problem you're solving. And when you have a new idea, to resolve the problem in a better way. Always check your solution against the problem. Okay, I'm going to go a bit faster now. I was thinking an hour was super long, but now we've been like 30 minutes. We worked with a company called Corentium that made radon sensors. Do you know why we should be scared of radon?
It's radioactive.
No, it's not radioactive, but you can get really, really, really sick. That was one of the problems. People aren't scared of radon, even though you should be. It's the number 2 reason why people get lung cancer. So even if you don't smoke, if you're super unlucky to live in a house where the radon is quite high, it's much more easy to get lung cancer. And Corentium, they had a challenge. The largest challenge was that people aren't aware of the danger. So they made radon sensors, but people didn't feel that they had a job to do. So kind of the job was secret. So that was kind of the first problem. And the other problem was that the way we measured radon was not that available. It was quite hard. You had to have an expert, and it was not done right. So no user would say, oh, I should really wish I had an easier radon sensor that measured things right. So here they have that's one of the points here is that even though you talk to your customer or analyze your customers, it's not that job is obvious. It's not that they're telling you, we need this. But this is a real customer need. So you can find needs that no one talks about, but you know them and you have to tell them. So they had a product that looked like this. And this was telling you both the short-term and the long-term average of becquerel. And the problem with this is that most people don't know if this is okay or not. Should I be scared when it's 133 becquerel? I'm actually not sure. I have forgotten the numbers. So, and it's not immediate to understand how it works. And also that actually radon is something that kind of changes from day to day and season to season and weather to weather, they think. So the average doesn't help you that much because you actually have to know about when is it really high and when is it low. So they started to develop a new concept where they could easier read from the product itself if it's good or bad, or should you be scared, should you do something, and connected to your phone so you could have more data, so it'd be easier to understand. So they had this is kind of the solution, and then they unleashed the technology, because then they know what kind of job should we do. They knew what kind of hiring criteria the job had. And then they could search for what kind of technology should we apply to this product to make it work. And when you have, so this is kind of the new sensor. And when you have a sensor that measures air, it's easy to put in tons of sensors. As you said, we can measure everything. But then they had to focus, what kind of job are we doing? And what kind of technology do we really, really, really need to do that job? And you guys who works with development, and maybe some of you are working with tech, this is your job, is to tell the crazy designers who wants everything to say that you can use this technology, not this one. Because here lies the costs. The more sensors, the more Wi-Fi, the more everything, the more expensive will it be to both produce but also to buy. So it's always try to find the smallest way to getting the product out to the market but still serve the job. So they measured radon, but also I think it was temperature and something like that. And they didn't have Wi-Fi, even though it sound reasonable, but they used Bluetooth because they think it's your home, it's the easy way to start, it's much cheaper, and it's easier to get first in the market with a smart radon sensor. So it looked like this. I think there was last fall or something that they were in the market. They're getting a lot of attention. They're still working with their business model, I think, because it's a bit more expensive than the traditional products in the market. So it's hard to tell about the added value since the consumer aren't that aware of radon. So they work in a lot of sectors. So is a guy called Roberto Verganti that has kind of summed up the thing I'm trying to tell you. He has summed it up on one slide. And that he say is that when we have to build new products, we have to say, look at the change of meaning or the design-driven, the user-driven approach. But we also have to combine it with new technology. So it's not the technology push, it's not completely user market pull. It's combining those two that will make you filthy rich. I'm just kidding. That makes innovation, makes something new and makes something valuable to the market. And I strongly believe using technology as an enabler. A lot of designers like me are a bit scared of technology. It's something really new for them, especially like new technology. They have a hard time to apply it. They see the job, they have the concept, but their way of solving the problems are through an app. And they can't see the solution outside like the mainstream technology. So I think the developers and the technologies' job is to help them see the opportunities in new technology. At Eggs, we have something we call creative technologists, and I love working with them. They are super smart to find, when I want to make something like this, and I want to create that kind of value, they can add on new technology and say, if we apply this, if we apply that, we can make that kind of solution. And then we have like a super smart hypothesis of an IoT or VR or whatever product. And then they find the super cheapest way to test it out. So this is a steering mechanism for an underwater drone that they figure out that the one thing that we're really familiar with is game controllers. They're quite easy to control a drone with Nintendo, I think it is, a controller. And then they I don't know why they have a cardboard, but they had, and they used VR goggles, and then they like taped mobile phone on the top of them so they could have like a sensor to know where the head went. So it doesn't have to be super expensive, it doesn't have to be super fancy, it just have to kind of combine the cheapest part of technology to figure out, does this work? And then you can test it, and when it works, you can build it. So this is figuring out what to do. So the next 20 minutes is kind of just, we have a few principles we use when we're designing for digital transformation. Especially we focus on this is when we work with companies that's not born digital, because this is more or less new to them. So the first thing is thinking ecosystem. Isn't this fancy? So if you are a producer of an office chair, and you want to go from a dumb office chair to a smart office chair, it's easy to put a sensor in the chair, and then it's connected. And I know that several office chairs companies have done that without successing at all. But if you focus on the user and the user's job or problem, you can figure out that they might have back pain. A lot of people working in offices have back pain, and they say that it's often because we sit wrong or sit too much. So if the job is back pain, maybe the chair could cooperate with your wearable, and maybe they could talk together and help me better on my back pain. And maybe they could also talk with my desk. So they could collaborate with helping me with my back pain. So it's kind of figuring out what kind of products could collaborate to do the job in a better way. This is not like normal thinking if you produce chairs. So it's always trying to figure out what are we doing and who could help us do that. So if you look at ear things, they've already gone from like the first product that was super easy to like that was called wave, because if you waved in front of it, it will be green or yellow or red. They've created like a hub, so they different sensors can talk to each other. They also made a Wave Plus that's measuring much more in the air. And I think the next step for them would be to start talking with other products as fast as the products are smart. So if you have smart windows, the easiest way to get the radon level down is to air out. So if you have a ventilation system or smart windows, instead of telling you you have to open your window, it can just tell the window, open up. And if everything else fails, the product could call an expert and say, hey, you have to call Eline. She really needs your help to figure out what we can do with our house. So when you think the ecosystem, it's easier to see where to grow and where to expand and who to partner up with. It's not that they should start making windows. It should just partner up with them. One of the best companies doing ecosystems is Amazon. Have any of you idea what the pictures is trying to tell? Oh, it's a bit old. I think it's last fall. It was Amazon that bought Whole Food. Because they have already now Alexa and the Echo Dot. That is Alexa, or your connection to Alexa, where you could do everything. So that's the job is kind of a personal assistant type of job. I haven't worked with Amazon, unfortunately, so I'm not sure what kind of job they describe, but they know part of the job is helping them to buy groceries. So when I say, hey Alexa, could you buy me whatever I'm lacking in my refrigerator? Alexa said, oh, sure, Eline, I'll buy it now. And then instead of calling a partner, they then send the order to Whole Food. And then they earn money both on the EcoDot and also selling products. So that is the way they're thinking, is what kind of jobs do we do? And what kind of companies can we buy to earn more money in that value chain? Another thing is that we see with digital product is you have to learn. And that's where your data is. You have to collect data. Your products have to collect data, and it have to learn what your customers prefer and how they use your product. And then the product itself should alter, but also your team should be organized in a way that you always develop your product and always develop your service. So you have to think as your product and your service as something that's continually evolving. This might be really natural for you, but a lot of leaders doesn't budget that way. They budget product development for a couple of years, then it's operational budget. So it's quite hard for them to ask for a budget of continuously development. But you have to tell them that's the way it is. So a product that always adjusts itself, this is old, but I think it's the easiest way to explain how a product learns from you as a user. It's Google Nest that controls your heating system. And the Nest learns from the user all the time. So it learns when I'm at home, it learns when I'm at job, it learns approximately when do I adjust the temperature up, when do I adjust it down, and then it automates more and more my preferences. So they learn to know if Eline likes to have it warm in her house or cold, and when do I have to have it warm and when do I have to have it cold. Maybe the best in class is Tesla, because they work with a product that really was finished when it was finished. You sold the car, you never saw it again, or you maybe sold some parts. But other than that, you were done. Now Tesla have a vision, and I'm not sure if they do this, but they have once or twice a year, they want to update your car. They want to give you a feeling of a new car. And I've talked with a lot of Tesla owners. Are any one of you Tesla owners? Yay. Do you feel that you have a new car once in a while? No. Then they're not doing their job. Because people have told me when the car is updated, when it comes like large updates, they feel that they have a completely new car, even though the car is several years, not that many years because it's not that old. But they feel they have a new car. So they are thinking a car, something as concrete as a car, as a service that should continuously evolve. So whatever you're working with, if Tesla thinks they're continuously evolving, you do it as well. I think we just jump to this. As a designer working with technology, we have to talk about the thing we call simplicity. Because with new technology, we tend to overcomplicate things. Because we have such much data and we have so much information we want to give the users, and there's much more systems and connections that we have to communicate to the users. And the more complex the service is, the worse is the user experience. So I think you have to kind of dive into and embrace the complexity, but you have to not get lost in it. You have to figure out what kind of job are we helping the customer with, and what kind of information do they need when to do their job. We have done this a lot with the verft. Can't remember the English word. The one who builds the ships. And they have a system that looks like this, for real. So it's people working with these systems, and if there's an error in place, they have to have action immediately. But finding the error and see it fast is quite hard. Or you see error. And then you have to figure out, follow the lines, what kind of connection is, where is the real error. And when we do this kind of work, we use the is Fluffy sick approach. This is Fluffy. And we are wondering if she is sick. And we have made blood test for her. And there's the result. Have any of you idea if Fluffy is sick? She looks sick, or happy, or scared, or I don't know. So the first thing we do is kind of giving data context. Because this data, you have to be an expert to read. And even for experts, it will take a bit of time to process the information and do anything about it. So we add kind of a range. Fluffy is healthy in this range. So if you have like a couple of minutes, it's easy for you, or not easy, but you can figure out if she is sick or not. But if this is kind of rushing, should we operate Fluffy or not? Should we call the veterinarian? And we have short of time, calling 114 as DNB would like us to do. This will take a bit of time. But if you make it visual, it will take us a second to see that, Fluffy isn't sick. She's just happy in a cat scary way. And this is what we do when we work with complexity. So think about Fluffy the next time. This is just the same system that you saw earlier, but it's made not in like how things are, how they actually is. It's what kind of information do the user need, and how could we visualize it in an easy way when they have to do something. So here it's quite easy to see that the ballast tank 4 is something wrong with, and it's the filter pressure, and it's something wrong with the temperature. So in just a second, even though I have no clue about boats or ships, I can find the problem. They've done this for a lot of the large ship manufacturers, and it helped them quite a lot. But the same approach you could do with underwater drones, as you saw earlier. This was a typical underwater drone used for inspection underwater for professionals. We said, hey, let's do the same for commercial use. So we created a commercial underwater drone with a company called Blue Eye. That's easy to control. You do it with your mobile phone, and everyone can do it. So you don't have to be professional to use the products. And it isn't so fancy as the last one, but it works well. And I think that's one of the clues with knowing what you're helping the customer with. It's easier to kind of focus on what kind of information do they need, what kind of technology should we use. So the last one. It's quite soft, but if your company is interested in selling your product and earning money and being successful and not being in front of the newspaper, empathy is something for the wrong reason, of course. Everyone wants to be on the front of the newspaper if it's good, but it's seldom is. So designing with empathy is really important. And it's, again, focusing on the user. I've said it like 1,000 times, I'm sorry. I read and watched Anita Novak. She's super smart, and she's talking about empathy. Check her out. She is telling us that with new technology, we're making the world, or it's possible that we make the world really, really, really bad. Because the possibilities of making a really horrible world is now more possible than ever. I was at an IE conference, and one of the experts were kind of just predicting doomsday and saying that the robots will kill us, that we will make products that kind of just makes us worthless. And if you think of it, like all evolvement in technology, but also more than technology, has like backside or flip side that's not good. So even though you, what kind of examples? I can't come any examples now. It's too early in the morning for me. I have one here. Good. Google has used an AI to predict or tell you what's on their image. And the flip side of that is that one guy found out that Google said that his friends were gorillas. Ouch. So they will survive, but still, it's not good. So I think like when you apply new technology, you always have to think, what's the worst that can happen with this technology? And how could we design it so this won't happen?
Another backfire example, a lot of jobs are disappearing.
Yep, a lot of jobs are disappearing. And they have, for each like technology or industrial revolution, they have. My hope is that there will be new jobs. Another example is, this is not my car, but it's a colleague of mine's car. Do you know what the P with the steering wheel is? Yeah, it's automated parking. It's parking assistant from Volkswagen Passat 2010. A colleague of mine has had this car since 2012, and he's working with the connected world as I do, and he's super tech geek, but he never tried this one. And we have discussed several times, why aren't you trying it out? And I think it is that it's the risk and the cost. And I think it also is that it looks like this. It doesn't like build trust. You don't feel that you can trust the car to not crash in the BMW that's on the other side. So the design of the product doesn't build trust. So it's like super complex technology, but with the horrible design, it doesn't add value at all.
I got a car from 2014, which also has this automated parking thing. And I hate parking, so I figured like read the manual to try it out. But the user experience is just so terrible, so confusing in cars that even though I have the manual there, I couldn't figure it out on an open road where I had all the time. It's faster to do manual parking.
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem when you don't think about the user and the context they're using the technology is that they're scared shit of using the technology. Because new technology is scary, because you don't know if you can trust it. I see that the time is it's like 2 minutes left, but check this out, try it by yourself. I think it's Forskningsrådet, if I don't remember wrong, who has like artificial human resources but there we tried to say that we have to take a holiday because my father have died. This is just fake. So I had to take a days off to get to the funeral. And he was like, no results. And I'm just, okay, try to make it easier. I need to take a few days off because I have to arrange a funeral. And then he said, like, the law does not give the right to funeral. It's kind of, my dad died. And this is the result. So it's no empathy at all. So when you use AI bots, and this for your employees, this could be the results. So you have to also think with empathy. And the last one, that's probably the most important, is security. And we've seen thousands of breaches of security. When everything is connected, when we are kind of in internet, we have to think about security. We have to secure the data. We have to secure people. And I think a guy called Bruce Schreiner has written a book now. It's Click Here to Kill Everybody. And he is also saying it's doomsday, because when you can just hack the pacemaker or the car or the train or the plane, you don't need a bomb. You just need a hacker. So all of you guys, this is your job to make sure that the products and the services we create are safe. And last but not least, remember the Sustainable Development Goals. Because when you're user-centered, the user doesn't necessarily care about the environment. They don't care about other people. They just care about getting the job, getting their kids to eat, and stuff like that. You always, always have to think about sustainability when you develop new products. Because if we're not making a better world. And that's everyone's job.
Only one problem. If another company doesn't see it that way and earn more money, they can compete throughout the market.
Yeah, I think, and there's tons of examples of companies focusing on sustainability that earns more money. And also, in the long run, helping people with their long-term goal, their long-term values, you will win in the end. And if you look at the banking industry now, that is quite horrible. I think the banks that think about transparency, sustainability, about responsibility, they will win if they survive. But I think all of us who works with this have to work with this, because we're living in the world. So, 6 takeaways from me. Focus on the user always, but also unleash technology. Think about ecosystem, always learn, always adapt. Create simple but complex products, and design with empathy. Thank you. It was 2 minutes over, I'm sorry.